Welcome, everyone in the audience, and for those who are watching this after the fact, to our Interop talk session live at the HIMSS Conference 2024. With me are Jennifer Blumenthal from Milliman IntelliScripts and Stephen Lane, the Chief Medical Officer at Health Gorilla. I am Dave Castle. I am your host, Chief Customer Officer here at Health Gorilla. And let's go ahead and get started. So what have you seen so far at the conference that has caught your eye? What's the buzz?
AI. Everybody's talking AI. You know, how is AI going to change healthcare, change the world, do everything for everybody all the time? It's definitely high on the hype cycle this year.
AI. I spent a lot of time in the Epic booth learning about the tools that they've implemented. It's pretty cool. I'm impressed.
Interesting. I've heard a lot of people talking about the AI session on Monday. I was not able to attend. Now I regret not signing up for it. Either of you, I don't think, were there either. But I can confirm AI is a big hot topic here. Something that I think a lot of us have been thinking about. I know the government has been putting a lot of thought lately into how to manage the expectations around AI and its potential impact, both for good and for potentially doing some damage as well. And I understand from the session on Monday that governance was a big topic there as well. And it's something I've even heard from individual organizations who are talking about getting AI up and running in within their organizations.
Yeah, I think the thing that I notice is most people are building on top of one of the cloud providers or using ChatGPT. There's not seems to be people branching out into other sort of AI companies. They want to stay with something that they can kind of believe in and invest in.
Do what's easy, make money fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about AI, sort of bringing it back to interoperability, is of course AI needs to be trained on data, and the more the better, arguably. And the higher the quality of the data, the better. So I think that there is a connection back to the work that we're all doing in terms of trying to exchange data, to bring data together, to normalize and assure the quality of that data so that the AI that is out there can be made more useful. I mean, I think that a lot of these sort of retail models that are just trained on the entire internet of data, they go up to a point, but not necessarily to where we need them to be really reliable partners in healthcare.
I actually saw a demo for a new AI company where they go, their LMM, they go, you can upload PDFs, CCDAs, and they go FHIR. I was like, you guys aren't going to make it in this ecosystem. I was like, fire? Is that what you're trying to say? But going back to what Dr. Lane is saying, I think that it's the same way I use AI today. Like if I want help writing an email, I'll put it into something, it gives me back a better formatted email versus what I saw in some of the booths was, ways to help doctors with all their documentation and allow them to be doctors instead of, writing out all these notes, and they can actually they can analyze the information versus inputting the information. I thought that was pretty cool. That's what AI in the future of healthcare looks like to me.
One of the things that I'm excited about, I know we had a presentation here yesterday on chart summarization using AI, which I think as a clinician is really exciting. The idea that you can pour in a bunch of data and you can get out something that actually makes sense and that can be tailored to your use case. I'm a cardiologist, I'm a pediatrician, I'm a public health nurse. I think that's very exciting. I've actually started a conversation this week. I just had it with my friends at ONC. You may recall that part of the advancement of the 21st Century Cures Act is this notion that an individual can make a request for all of the electronic health information, all EHI that's held by a covered actor, which includes providers, of course. And I think that the combination of all EHI requests and using AI to digest and interpret and summarize that data could be incredibly powerful. And it's something that I'm really interested in seeing happen in the marketplace, that there's no defense, that if you don't produce a machine-readable version of all the EHI in your system, that's an information blocking event. So being able to do that, harnessing AI, not just to read a given progress node, but to look at the entire corpus of data, in my case, 20 plus years of data in EHR databases, that I think could be really incredible.
Yeah, that's just for anyone in the audience. There are two requirements. There's one, patients can access their data through an API to an app of their choice. The other one, which Dr. Lane's talking about, is the all EHI export, which is basically anything that the covered entity has on you within their health system can be exported in a machine-readable format, but then what do you do with that? You're not porting it into an app. So he's saying porting it into some sort of large language model to summarize all of that data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's an interesting point that you're sort of touching on here in this concept, is that we've actually crossed a little bit of a threshold, I think, in interoperability where, no, hear me out, where in the past there has always been a question of, oh my God, I need more data, I can't get the data, and now it's, oh my God, I've got the data. There's so much of it, I don't know how to manage it. It's actually a real challenge that we've been addressing with a couple of our customers here actually over the past few weeks, where there's simply more data than they expected. It's obviously a good problem to have. It beats the alternative, but at the same time, there is a need for tools to actually make sense of the information. And to provide you with, as you were saying, with a summary of the chart, with ways that you can get a sense of what's going on with a patient without going through these literally thousands of pages of information that might be coming through.
But this is a good segue to our next topic, is that assumes that the Fire server that is built can handle the all EHI export. There's still a lot of, like beyond the top 10 vendors, there's still a lot of Fire servers that are not operational.
Well, just to be clear, though, Jennifer, all EHI does not imply that it's a Fire query.
Right.
You
but
could manage
isn't the
an all
data still
EHI.
coming from a Fire server, or is it in a
No.
different database?
It can be anything. The rule did not specify how you're making that data available.
But don't you think most people put it into a Fire database, or you don't think so?
If you think about all the EHI, the images, the pulse tracings, I mean, that's not all in Fire.
I just assumed they stuck it in. Well, I guess it could be in a different type of database. I never really thought about that. And that you're right, the API doesn't have to be a Fire API. They didn't designate it, so it could be any type of API, which was a bad move.
It doesn't
on
even
the
have
regs.
to be an API. It just has to be a machine-readable file.
But I think most people did put an API in front of it.
Well, I just talked to one of the largest EHR vendors, and that's not what they did.
Oh, I'm wrong.
All right. And Jennifer did
told you.
raise the point there of infrastructure and how that actually plays a role. And I was referring earlier to these literally thousands of pages of documents, and we do in fact see patients who have literally over 1,000.
That's not very many, Dave. I can tell you, having sorted through those charts as a clinician, 1,000 pages is nothing.
Fair. I thought for a second you were going a different direction there and telling me that that was a major exception, and I'm like, I don't think that's the case.
Oh, no, I would say you're maybe 1 and 2 orders of magnitude off for a long-term, multi-complex patient who's been in and out of the hospital. I mean, a 1-week ICU stay is probably thousands of pages just by itself.
True. And to Jennifer's point about Fire and the importance of the infrastructure, we have had 10 years now, give or take, of work on document exchange and ever more widespread use of document exchange that in turn has led to investments in infrastructure over time to support that volume. We have not seen that sort of volume in Fire-based exchange. And I'm interested in your thoughts and your experience on, is the infrastructure for Fire-based exchange ready to handle that volume?
So my background and where I've tried to access data and the vehicles I've used to try and access data has been the national networks, so Care Quality Commonwealth, state HIEs, like State of New York, and then Fire APIs, so basically point-to-point integrations, right, in the open developer ecosystem. So within Care Quality, there's been a lot of work on a Fire IG, but it's not productionalized, like people aren't using it. So we've never seen Fire used at scale within a national network. With these point-to-point Fire APIs, which you go to Epic, Cerner, Meditech, NextGen, whoever, and you essentially get access to these APIs, these are still direct connections to individual Fire servers. They're not working within some sort of national network. So we haven't seen Fire at scale yet, and most of these APIs are working to their best of ability to check a compliance check mark in the open developer ecosystem. A lot of people complain that the patient access APIs aren't utilized enough, so both on the CMS side and the ONC side, but it takes like at least 5 years to connect to every Fire server there is in the country. So that's a really big lift to connect to every Fire server. And the promise is, join a national network, get registered across every Fire server and have access to all. That's so far away if we can't even get the Fire servers and the Fire APIs and the open developer ecosystem to work, because they've not been tested in the real world. They just got certified by their, certifier for their ONC certification. So I just think we're like a really far away from production-ready Fire at scale.
So Jennifer, I'll ask a question, even though I'm on this side of the stage here. So what about TEFCA? What about TEFCA Fire, facilitated Fire coming into a TEFCA version near you? How is that going to change that ecosystem?
I don't know, because we haven't seen it yet in the national networks. I'm a little worried that we're going to see it in the TEFCA landscape. You have two national networks. One's predominantly Epic, and one is a combination of people who are in Commonwealth, right? And then you have Health Gorilla, but let's be real, we haven't seen Fire exchange at scale there, so how is it going to translate directly into the TEFCA landscape? I'm being serious. I don't know.
I don't think any of us know, because it hasn't been done yet. However, it is a really interesting question, and the point I raised earlier, we've had many years now to get used to the scale of document exchange, but if you flash back to 2016, 2017, many of the players that are now involved in document exchange at large scale had to learn some quick lessons as care quality ramped up. That they realized at that point they were not able to handle that volume, and they needed to make some changes. And there were early hiccups in care quality's development around everyone being able to handle that volume. And Jennifer, you look really eager to jump in. So I think we may be wise to expect something similar in the Fire world.
Well, this is the things that I've been spending a lot of time on recently is, so the difference between when you query via care quality, you're saying, I want records on Dave Castle, please return records on Dave Castle, and you're getting these single documents at a time. You could get a lot of single documents, but you're still getting single documents. In the Fire world, you're saying, I want records on Dave Castle, and then I almost imagine it like a tree. I think you gave me this analogy, so I'm reusing it, where like the trunk is the API, and then all the branches are all the different Fire resources, and each Fire resource can branch into another branch. So you could get back incredible amounts of data all at a very granular level that isn't just a single document. And I think then you start saying, okay, we're going to move beyond just a single patient query, and we're going to do a large population query. And can the Fire servers stand up to that type of patient population query? And that is the thing that is not proven in the ecosystem today. So when everybody talks about Fire at scale, we're not talking about single patient requests. We're talking about more B2C, B2B purposes. So when people don't support patient access and they won't, allow us to connect to their Fire servers because of whatever reasons, they're actually putting themselves at a disadvantage because they haven't tested their Fire servers in the real world. So they're really not prepared for Fire at scale within the national networks.
So I think the flip side of that, though, is that Fire, with document query, for the most part, you're getting a CCD. You're getting a defined document that the scope of which is defined by the source. How far back does it go? What do they include in the sections? What are the time parameters, et cetera? So, CCDs vary tremendously, but probably only over 2 or 3 orders of magnitude. With Fire, of course, you can query for everything you know about Dave Castle, or you can query for the A1Cs for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen yet what is going to be the behavior of people sending Fire queries.
Nope. Yep.
Because, when we talk about pop health, for the most part, the pop health use cases are focused on things like diabetes or heart failure or something. What you'd hope, and again, as you say, we had growing pains with this on care quality, what you'd hope is people don't just say, oh, give me everything, because that will break the system, right?
I think people want to do that, though. That's the problem. So, like, if they can't do that, that needs to be shared with the organizations. Because I think, let's put it this way, interoperability is supposed to make it easier to share data, right? There's also this idea that technology should make it easier to adopt newer technologies, right? So we're at a point where, 10 years ago, if you wanted to play in health IT, it was pretty expensive to do out all the integration work. We're at the point where it's easier to connect to national networks, whether on-ramps or whatever it is. So there's going to be a lot of uneducated first-time users trying to do everything. They don't have that background of context that you just explained. So they are going to try and pull everything, and they're going to crash, the client-side server.
Well, and actually, I think it's interesting. It's more than probably just first-time inexperienced users who might want to do that. Although I do agree that will be a phenomenon as well. But excuse me, part of what the expectation is around FHIR is that it will make it easier for those who have, for example, minimum necessary restrictions under HIPAA to be able to do queries. So minimum necessary does place some guardrails, if you will, around what you're able to request. But within those guardrails, there can still be an enormous amount of volume. And I think some of the folks like payers, like value-based care organizations that are doing coordinated care, that need information for healthcare operations and payment purposes, will actually, once, as Stephen was saying, to get a large volume of data. And it will be interesting to see how that actually works out, if they're being sort of funneled into this FHIR approach to getting that data.
I think I'm just kind of, in my mind, trying to politely say that the new people trying to use this technology maybe don't always have the best intent or are planning to abide by minimum necessary. They're looking for loopholes to get all data.
Well, I think it's a good point and something we need to be watchful for as an industry. I also think, though, Dave, your point, that one of the promises of FHIR is that it allows you to make queries that are minimum necessary, allows us to be able to support use cases that we really couldn't support using document-based exchange because it was too much data for the purpose. And the need to attend to minimum necessary both goes to the requester, but also to the responder.
You know what, going back to what will this look like in TEFCA? When people ask me about TEFCA right now, I say TEFCA will not be a thing until it reaches the same volume of data exchange that we currently see on care quality and Commonwealth. So it will, that's when TEFCA is at scale, when it reaches the same volumes that we're at today within the national networks. FHIR is so much further behind because it really hasn't been used at scale yet. So we can't talk about FHIR at scale until it's used at scale within the regular open developer ecosystem. It needs to get, it's like you got to break it first before it's useful.
Fair point. I have not thought of the need to break FHIR before it's useful. But you're actually right. We didn't discover the issues that I was referring to earlier with care equality scale for document exchange until someone actually pushed up against those boundaries.
It's the startup mentality. Build fast, break things. That's what you're trying to do. And if you don't do that with something that the government mandated, and companies aren't using it, then we haven't broken it yet. We need to break it to rebuild it so that it's used at scale.
Yeah.
With regard to exchange volume, what we see in the pre-existing national framework, care equality, that includes Commonwealth, eHealth Exchange, Epicare Everywhere, we're seeing billions of documents now being exchanged. When you're talking about FHIR resources, you have to kick it up by 2 to 3 orders of magnitude because a document of data, when you represent it in resources, is so many more resources. In my health system, for a long time, used to go every week or two and go look at the dashboards that the vendor provided to look at the uptick of resource exchange. And it's very impressive. FHIR starting 5-6 years ago, just really started taking off. Today, Michael Marchant from UC Davis said the same thing. He said, he's been tracking that dashboard and he says, FHIR is happening. People are exchanging FHIR. I can see it in my own organization. So it's true we don't hear as many people talking about it, but when you look, it's happening. A lot of it is happening for sort of B2B transactions, for internal transactions within an enterprise. I don't think we're seeing it for the at scale between entities as much as we're going to over the next couple years.
Yeah, as soon as all those payer rules kick in, you're going to see a lot of exchange between covered entity to covered entity.
Yeah, you're raising interesting points. I'm interested actually in what are the raw numbers. Not, you don't need to share precisely, but Stephen, you referenced the dashboards that you and folks like Mike Marchand are able to access. Are we in the billions on those?
I don't know. I can't see those dashboards anymore now that I work with you here. But we could ask Michael. I mean, he's got a big entity there. But I think that and those numbers. I started talking about them in meetings 3-4 years ago, and no one else was talking about it, and they're still not talking about it. I think it's a very, in care quality, we're more than happy to talk about the billions of documents exchanged, but I haven't seen anybody talking about fire resource numbers.
I think also a risk just in, utilization and adoption is what happens with the change in administration. Bum, bum, bum. Is there still going to be, people who are really pushing everything forward, or does it die for 4 years?
Or does it accelerate?
Or does it die?
We're going to have a ringside seat.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have some indication from the previous administration, which was overseeing the initial development of TEFCA, that it simply was not. Now, some of this, whether this was coming down from the president or was simply a factor of who was at ONC, is an interesting open question. But there definitely was not the same progress and the same prioritization from a philosophical standpoint of TEFCA as opposed to bulk fire and some other priorities in the previous administration.
I will say, I'm going on record that Epic did do the best with their fire APIs out of all the fire servers out there. And they continue, and they're pushing forward TEFCA with their own QHIN. So, it's going to have to be the industry and the rest of the vendors deciding to follow that if the government doesn't move forward full steam ahead. So it could become the private sector pushing it forward versus the government.
I mean, that's...
It's a big statement, I know.
That is a big statement.
I'm recorded. I see you.
In addition to the shout out to Epic but it's an interesting point about the private sector. This is exactly why TEFCA it has so much promise, is because it's not just the private sector, that it has the government behind it, that it has the weight not just of ONC, but of other agencies at HHS, including in particular CMS, that I think we're all expecting, and CMS itself has signaled that they're going to incentivize.
Yeah, when is CMS going to pick a QHIN?
CMS is not going to pick one QHIN.
Oh, you think they're going to use multiple QHINs?
I think that I expect that CMS will potentially use multiple QHINs, not even so much by design, as the fact that it's such an enormous agency and there are so many different groups with different use cases. I could see CMMI Project 1 having, and that was just the Project X, I'll call it. That was just a variable. Having one QHIN that is selected for that particular project, and different sub-agency Project Y having another QHIN. Now, at some point, 5 years down the road, does that all consolidate? Maybe.
Oh, wait, this brings a whole new aspect to the fire server stabilization conversation. So most of the payers outsource their fire servers to third parties, and those fire servers, in my opinion, are they're just a little bit. There are certain companies who set up fire servers for payers, and they've done a good job, right? And the payers, for me, have been much more open in allowing at least the patient access APIs to happen, versus a lot of the EHR vendors are still confused under their, conditions of certification. But if you play the movie forward and CMS starts picking QHINs for different use cases, what do you want to call it, regions, sectors, whatever it is,
projects.
Projects.
Really. Different initiatives, the different things that CMS is doing. They have different use cases.
CMS
for,
could be the ones who push everything forward, especially if they start passing new rules that say, hey, providers, you have to get into this. You have to join TEFCA. I still don't like the part where you get an info blocking pass if you join TEFCA. I'm not into that one.
We could go there.
I don't like it.
But again, it excludes Fire Exchange.
I know, but I still don't like it at all. There's too many provider organizations with legal teams that really the legal teams are just protecting the interests of their organization and not thinking about the responsibilities under the law. So I don't like this idea of introducing a new way to get out of it when they haven't even finished the work that was assigned to them in the first place.
Interesting. That is interesting. And sorry, I'm sort of already kind of processing through what that all could mean in terms of what if there is or is not an information blocking exception or not an exception, but a safe harbor, if you will, for TEFCA participation.
It is an exception. It's officially called an exception.
I don't like it.
Is it an exception? Because the exceptions are very
But
formalized.
I think they clarified what it
things.
really means.
Yeah. So the what came out in HTI 1 was there is an information blocking exception if both the requester and the data holder are TEFCA participants, and the request is not for fire, that the responder can say, I'm going to respond to your request using TEFCA.
But it could grow from there at a certain point that they come back in a future rule and expand it beyond that scope.
Well,
right
they
now.
certainly could.
Yeah.
The point is they're looking for any opportunity they can to incentivize the use of TEFCA. This is a pretty weak incentive. I mean, I got to tell you, and they watered it down appropriately from the NPRM to the final rule because of feedback from people who understand and care about these things and really wanted to continue to advance fire.
Fair point, and good clarification on its status as a officially being a formal exception. But to your point, I think it is it's a relatively weak exception, as you said, and at some point could there be, and I think this is what Jennifer is referring to, a much stronger exception safe harbor incentivization for TEFCA built into information blocking. That perhaps has some unforeseen perverse effect of actually not necessarily encouraging information blocking per se, but gives people an out from that they perhaps shouldn't have. Arguably,
I have people claim exceptions right now when I make a request for the patient access APIs, and they'll just be like infeasibility. I'm like, why is it infeasible? We can't tell you, and I'm just like, you have to actually back this up, document it. This does not get you off the hook just saying infeasible in a sentence. So, again,
fair
there's
enough.
a lot of legal teams within private organizations and public that really need to understand their obligations under the law.
I didn't know that you could just say infeasible.
Oh, yes, I have emails that just say infeasible. I'm like,
well, you
what
can,
does that
but then
mean?
you have to actually report this as an information blocking concern, and then OCR has to go investigate it. And wait, it's not OCR.
No, but the
it's
internal
OIG.
teams should be documenting it. They can't just
Yes.
Some product
But
manager
you
just
can't
can't claim
force them.
infeasible. No, but
Yeah.
if somebody does go in and do investigation, they have to show why, and they need to provide that proof, and it can't just be random. And it also, there's the clause about pro-competitiveness, you can't do one for one organization and not for the other organization. There are so many ways that people are just saying, well, this is a government mandate and we're a private company or a public company and we don't want to do this. I think that there's going to be, going back to fire at scale, we are not at scale just with the open developer APIs. Fire at scale has a long way to go within TEFCA.
Court systems exist and the judicial system exists in general for when things have really broken down, and ideally we don't have to resort to it in most cases. And I think the same should be true for information blocking. You shouldn't always have to rely on the long government process to actually work itself out.
So that we resolve this 5 years from now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
Eventually, perhaps the wheels of justice will slowly grind their way towards a solution. But in the meantime, the world will have moved on from whatever the original problem was.
Yeah.
So we can't rely on that necessarily as a short-term driver. Obviously, the threat of that long information blocking process working itself out is something that healthcare providers and other actors take seriously, and that's where it has an advantage.
I do have to say, I have Citizen has this, naughty list of organizations that are not releasing traditional paper records from their HIM departments, and it's an interesting correlation to see the organizations that are bad at releasing paper records and are also not authorizing their FHIR APIs. So then they're really on the naughty list.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually.
Yeah, I like looking at that.
But not surprising.
I'm like, why would they do this if they already don't do that?
In fact, it would have been interesting if there were some that wouldn't do it in paper but are happy to do it in digital. That would have been nice.
Yeah, that might just be like a workflow issue in their HIM departments too.
Yeah.
So you got to break that into 3 categories to analyze it. God, I need some interns.
Sorry, you need what?
I need interns to do all my fun projects.
Well, there's some little kiosks for a lot of universities out there. You could maybe get their,
That's a good idea.
Their scan lists from them of the badges they've scanned. But I think we're actually coming up on time. Any closing thoughts in terms of the conference and what you're seeing here, what the buzz is, and or any thoughts further on FHIR?
And then one thought I'll throw out is just a reminder that the ONC's HTI-1 rule went into effect Monday, so 2 days ago, which is very exciting. I'm a big proponent of expanding data exchange, and that HTI-1 includes US CDI version 3 as the new national standard for data exchange, even though it's not yet required in certified health IT. So, I think we are making progress. That we're talking about thorny problems, we're talking about impediments to advancement, but every year we come here, new things have come out, new things are getting implemented, and the future looks very bright.
Building on HTI-1, if you do not have your FHIR URLs published at the client level, please get that done. And please allow third-party apps to register for the patient access APIs if you want to see FHIR at scale.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Dave.
Indeed. Thanks for watching, and take care.